So, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this isn't an interview, Rabbi. I like to have conversations. So just imagine we're sitting in the synagogue and you're just having a nice chit chat with me. We're having a nice little conversation. But I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. It was such last minute, and someone on your end was receiving the emails and kindly said that we'd be able to do this morning for you. So thank you so much. In medicine, Rabbi, we have a love of definitions. We love to define things. Can I start by asking you, can you define what is Zionism? Because I know there's different types. There's political Zionism, there's religious Zionism, there's cultural Zionism. But what exactly is Zionism?
Okay, with the help of the Almighty, first I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so, inshallah, sanctify His name. Zionism, first maybe, you know what, before we explain what Zionism is, I think that I should first explain what Judaism is, because Judaism is what Zionism is feeding off of, and they are trying to basically totally hijack the name of Judaism and use this Judaism for a base of legitimacy, of gaining in the world the respect as a distinguished and a legitimate country. So therefore, the state of Israel, that is, because Zionism is the ideology behind the state of Israel. That's what it's all about. Zionism created a state, the state of Israel. So we have to understand, what are they feeding off of? Judaism. So what is Judaism? Basically, of course, I'm not going to give a lesson, what Judaism is, but we're just concisely trying to get just a broad overview of what this is. Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years. Jews, 3,000 years ago, were taken out of Egypt by the Almighty. We went to Mount Sinai, and which is in Egypt today, which was in Egypt, it's in Egypt today, and we stood by Mount Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses, went up on Mount Sinai and took the Torah from the Almighty, as the Almighty gave him the Torah, which is the blueprint of the world. We believe God gave this Torah, and it's just the 5 books of Moses. It's the compilation of 613 commandments that the Jews were given by Moses from the Almighty to the Jewish people. All the Jewish people were gathered around Mount Sinai, 600,000 men from the age of 20 to 60, and they're all their families, which is quite a large number. They all saw and stood there and saw how God said, "I am your God," and we all said that, as in one, we said that we will do and hear, accept whatever the God's commands are. So we made a covenant with God. And the covenant is to be subservient to God and uphold the laws of the Torah. This was 3,000 years ago. We believe it's totally the words of God. Therefore, we cannot try to change any of it. Rather, we adhere to it strictly. And throughout the generations, different issues change. For instance, there's inventions, electric cars, things. So we'd always try to understand how we have to adapt ourselves and apply these new inventions, but using these new inventions to serving the Almighty, and that it should be acceptable according to the Torah. For instance, we're not allowed to travel on the Sabbath. We're not allowed to use light fire on the Sabbath, because we believe God created the world on the 6th day. The 7th day He rested, and to show our belief in the Almighty, we, as is required in the Torah, one of the 10 commandments is that we should rest on the Sabbath, to show our belief in the Almighty who created the world 6 days. So now, that means we're not allowed to make fire. Now, electric came about, so the rabbis all discussed how does this apply, and it was decided that basically we're not allowed to open electric or do things. It's just like fire, and there's also other technical. So I'm just giving an example how we totally apply our lives that it should adhere to the laws of the Torah. That's 3,000 years already that we are following these strictly. This is called Orthodox Jewry. Now, Zionism started a mere 150 years ago, in that range, 130, 150 years ago, let's say. And it was a movement of people who are mostly non-religious Jews, almost entirely non-religious Jews. They weren't practicing. Some of them were total atheists. Some of them just didn't believe in dropped the religion, or they came from families who had already were non-religious. As a majority of them, I believe, came from the Reform Judaism. Reform Judaism was a movement that started, let's say, 50, 100 years prior to that, and it was a movement that was going to reform the Judaism, change it. Now, of course, that is totally just incongruous. It's just antithetical to Jews, because you can't change something that's given by God. God is above time and the space, and and therefore it never can be changed. That's what Judaism is all about. So what they're trying to reform, they're making really a different religion, basically. Yet they are labeling it Judaism. So they made Reform Judaism to gain legitimacy in the world. They ordained rabbis, or ministers, or whatever they would call it. They actually, sometimes they used a little slightly different terminology, that they call the synagogues temples a lot of times instead of synagogues, to refer to the temple that was King Solomon's temple. But basically, they in order to give it an aura of legitimacy, they used all the different aspects, all the different core elements of Judaism, and put it on themselves. So by doing, sometimes I like to say, like, if you steal money from somebody, you get arrested. If you take over a bank, you do some colossal theory, the government will work with you, that it should be able to work out fine. So that's what they are. Instead of just moving away from Judaism, and what they did was they decided to create a whole new Judaism, ordained rabbis, make it ordinations, make a branch, and call themselves a branch of Judaism, and so forth. So that was reform. Zionism, that was like 100 years prior to Zionism. Many of the people, therefore, in Europe, but it came mostly from Europe. Reform started in Europe by Moses Mendelssohn. His name should be obliterated. This was, by the way, a very learned person. But he simply was we call a rotten apple or something. He was just totally not following the religion. He wanted to change the religion. Now, it's unfortunately caught like fire in Europe, and many people followed along with it, because their concept was to assimilate, to gain acceptance in the world, instead of the Jew, that shtetl Jew that would call somebody who was dressed like I, who was so different from the society. They decided to become assimilated in the world. They'll be presentable. They'll be scientists, doctors, lawyers, and something, and anything that conforms, that should seem more like Christianity. They dressed they put an organ in their synagogues. They started dressing their cantors and their like the ones who would be in church. They should be totally the same as the non-Jews around amongst them. First of all, it's just sinful, because it's not Judaism. Why you just make something else, drop the religion? But this is what they did, and it didn't really work to a large degree. There was a lot of anti-Semitism going on anyway. It didn't help them. I don't. Tom allows, like, there was a famous Dreyfus trial in France, where there was Captain Dreyfus, who was accused of espionage, and it was a very famous trial. And then there was some newspaper reporters or editors who were very honest people, were very looking for the truth, and they said something smells fishy. How this captain was? It seems that they caught him. That he had written letters to Germany or something. A case of espionage. They caught him. They decided to delve into the case, and they were certain. They reported that this is false. It's not something. He's just being a scapegoat for other people. And it turned out and it became just a major issue in France. And all of a sudden, a lot of anti-Semitism started swinging. People started spewing anti-Semitism, including the court system, and everybody was and they proved him innocent. It was somebody who was a higher in the army, who was higher than this captain, who wanted to actually was sending letters to Germany, and they were and in order to free themselves of this, they placed the blame on this Jew. And people realized that anti-Semitism is alive and well, and that was one of the reasons the Zionists who came later came along and they said, look, assimilating is just trying to combine, to merge us with the people who are living among us is not really working. We should make our own state, our own country, where we will be able to be free of anti-Semitism. That was just an excuse because many of these were simply totally, they didn't believe in God. They wanted a national home for their own convenience. But there was two more tools of sort of like elements. There were the ones who wanted a simply based nationalism. So they wanted a country. And then there was some who simply they're trying to escape anti-Semitism, they'll make their own country.
But so that's understandable. You can understand why.
It is understandable.
It's understandable.
Oh, I'm not. That's what I'm trying to. That's what I'm trying to explain here. Where it's rooted in, like some of the reasons what it came about. Like we believe that it's really the works that Satan was driving them for this. We believe God controls the world, and He created something like the Satan, something to be able to confuse people. But basically, Zionism. One thing is certain: Zionism is 150 years around, and it was a transformation from subservience to God, from keeping the laws of the Torah, into a base nationalism, a base concept of having a piece of land, an army, all the trappings of a nation, baseball, football, all these soccer teams, and an Olympic team, and all the trappings. The picture I like to show, Jewish people, let me just show some pictures here. Like Jewish people, you will find, just the rabbis here. They had a meeting with from the United Nations, a delegation. Here's Rabbi Sonnenfeld, the chief rabbi. I'll show you many pictures of our rabbis. Another picture of rabbi, whatever. All that they dress like me. Basically, this is Judaism. While Zionism, when they made their state, just a picture of who was the sheikhs, who was the leaders of the state. You have a picture of David Ben-Gurion, reading the Declaration of Independence in 1948 in Independence Hall. Now, if you look at this picture, you'll see the hedayas. That I don't think there's one single person of these covering the head. They're making a Jewish state. That means to comply with Judaism. Judaism is a religion. It's not a political movement. It's a religion to be subservient to God. Every Jewish male, throughout our generations, though we have to cover our heads, just to see this, not one of them isn't covering their heads. It's the basics of Jews. You don't have to be a rabbi to cover your head. That's required on every single boy that turns from 3 on. He has to cover his head from 3 years on. So basically, they have the Star of David on the wall. They have the Herzl here. Also, he's not covering his head, obviously. But anyway, so basically, the beard is not a religious beard. It's like a goat has a beard. It's not a religious beard. Anyway, but basically, so we have the concept of this total different Judaism, yet using the symbols of Judaism, Star of David, the name Israel, which is Jacob in the Torah, menorah, symbols, different symbols of it. Everything they tried, they made a rabbinate and a chief rabbi. This is all window dressing. We look at it as a total farce because what Judaism, again, is subservience to God. They declare, and it's proudly, that they're a democracy. Democracy means that you're not obligated to keep the laws of the Torah, obviously. First of all, the democracy is ludicrous because, as everybody knows, they're only for select few they have their democracy, not for all. But let's just claim that they're a democracy. But that means, how dare you call yourself proudly a democracy when we believe that the Almighty rules the world and He has, for us, special laws that we have to keep the Sabbath, for instance. It may not affect another person, when you don't keep the Sabbath, but it's one of considered the cardinal crimes against God. If you do not respect the Sabbath and you're driving by them, everything goes on freely on the Sabbath. So basically, in its essence, Zionism is a heresy. It's a rebellion against God. But we'll add to that, not only this, but the concept that they're saying they're protecting themselves, they want to create a home, a safe haven. They ridicule the religious Jews and they say, "Oh, why don't you support it?" Well, we say we're in exile. That was a godly exile. I'll explain that with God's help. But so they say, "Yeah, so where's God to protect you? Where was God?" And so they start laughing. You're looking to God to protect you. See what happened through this 2,000 years. We had the Inquisition, the Crusades, and now Hitler, for instance. So they ridicule the religious Jew as if God doesn't have the power. But the power is the machine guns, the Uzi, and so on. So it's that is again. It's rooted in heresy and blasphemy that God can't protect us. God is weak. So the whole concept of Zionism, this national home that's supposed to be an insurance policy for Jews, a safe haven, is rooted in total rebellion against God and heresy. Well, I say it's heresy, but it's also rooted in a rebellion direct, because not only heresy, but in rebellion because when we were told by God, God took us out of Egypt 3,000 years ago through miracles that all the Jews saw there. Nobody refuted. We're people of the book. We never had a gap in our history. So people write. From all these people that write, somebody would have written something to say that it never didn't happen this way. But we believe we saw the miracles of the 10 plagues. We saw the splitting of the sea. We went into the Holy Land because God commanded us when we took the Torah to go into the Holy Land. Now, when we went in there, the walls of Jericho sunk. It was a miracle of God. And it was that we should build a temple to serve God, and any nation who believed in God could stay there. This whatever. But basically, the issue of when we went in, God stipulated, and this is in the books of the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, it was God stipulated that we should not, in any but we have to remain on a high level of holiness, because if we're not on that high level of holiness, the land will reject us because it is a holy land. And the Jews accepted to go in to be on this very high level of holiness. Eventually, we had the prophets that anybody could read. It's printed in English or whatever language you'd like. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, where they warned the Jewish people, you're not on that level and you will be sent out of the land. That came about 2,000 years ago. That's a period of around 1,000 years. 2,000 years since we took the Torah. 2,000 years ago, there was the destruction of the temple. King Solomon built the temple. It was destroyed. Then it was the second one. It was destroyed. When we were dispersed amongst the nations, we were put on the oath by God that we are not to return as a nation. As individuals, we're allowed to live there with the permission of the governing, whoever it may be. But we, as a nation, we should not return en masse, in large numbers. We should not rebel against any nation. We should be loyal citizens in every country residing. We should not make any attempt to end exile. This is an oaths of God. The Jewish people, for 2,000 years, are living in exile, dispersed in all the lands throughout Europe, in the lands in Egypt, in Iran, in Yemen. And we knew that we have to be loyal citizens and never to make an attempt to return en masse.
Rabbi,
that's a stringent oath of God. Yes.
Rabbi, I keep hearing that, it's our God-given right. It's in the Bible. It's in the Torah that this is our holy land and we're returning to our land. And this is our claim to Israel and Palestine, that, this is our land, even though it might be 2,000 years ago since we left it. We're returning to our homeland, and this is our God-given right. So why are they?
That's what the Zionists are saying.
Yeah.
The Zionists are saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And we say that's exactly what I'm speaking. This point right now that you're asking. We are told by God that we are expressly forbidden to return and create a Jewish state. That's the command of exile for 2,000 years. King Solomon, who built the temple, and everybody knows the King Solomon's temple, but he wrote a book we consider it the highest prophecy. It's called Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, and we warned that we are forbidden when it will come about the exile, because he built the temple. He was before the exile. When we are in exile, we are forbidden to return and make our own sovereignty, even 1 inch, 1 centimeter of Jewish control, Jewish sovereignty. That is expressly forbidden. Why? Because it's God's world. God said, I've sent you out of the land as a nation, and you are forbidden we say, because of our sins we are in exile, not because we were lacking a machine gun or Uzi, because we were lacking, because God the Almighty, whose world it is, said you are to be dispersed amongst the nations.
Why?
And for 2,000 years.
Why did God do that?
Because the Almighty said that, well, again, we made a covenant to uphold the laws of the Torah, 613 commandments on Mount Sinai. Then God said, when we're going to be this, like a nation of priests, it says, you should be to me a mamleches kahanim v'goy kodesh, a kingdom of priests and holy nation. Just like somebody who's a priest, you understand, he's constantly studying and trying to be meditating, trying to be close to God. The concept of Judaism is that we should be 24 hours a day, a Jewish person is required to study the Torah. Obviously, it means that we sleep, we eat, everything that we need to live, but we are required constantly to study the books of God and try to be a nation, a people of the book, a holy nation, to emulate God. Just as God is compassionate, you should be compassionate, and many issues that we should be subservient to God. That included that God wanted us to be in the Holy Land, that God for some reason considers this land holy, and therefore we should be there serving him in the temple. But if we're not on this extremely high level of holiness, not that we're terrible sinners, but we're not on that level of holiness, then the land will reject it. Just like when you put you make a heart transplant, or a kidney transplant. So the doctors give medication constantly because the body is sensitive. It shouldn't reject that transplant. The same thing is with it's like the Holy Land will reject us, it says in the Bible, if we are not on that level of holiness. Therefore, for 2,000 years, God sent us into exile. It happened through the Roman Empire, through the Greek Empire, but we believe it was only like it was the will of God, not because we were physically weak, but it was the will of the Almighty that we should be dispersed amongst the nations. I'll just throw in, it serves a dual purpose. There was the head of Orthodox Jewry in Germany of around 250 years ago. He combated Reform Judaism in Germany, actually before Judaism started. And his name was Rabbi Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. Everybody from the German communities will know who this is. He was the one who buttressed and really solidified the Orthodox Jewry that not all of Austria should fall prey to Reform Judaism, because Reform became very popular. And he speaks about this concept that we are sent into exile. He said, we are in exile. God is perfect, he said. If a king punishes an individual for rebelling against him, and he says he gives a decree of death, that they should kill him. So now he may feel bad for the whole family that suffers because this person was killed, the wife and the children, but he can't do anything about that. He's limited in what he could do. But God, writes Rabbi Shamshon for Hirsch's blessed memory, is perfect. So when God wanted us dispersed amongst the nations, he wanted that we should be humble, that we should return to be serving him properly until the day will come when God sees it's proper with his compassion and his will, that he will make a metaphysical change in the world where all humanity will recognize one God. There'll be a miracle. All the nations have a concept, all the religions maybe have a concept of Messiah. In Judaism, we call it Mashiach, the Messiah. And so then we believe one day God with his compassion will make a metaphysical change in the world where all humanity will recognize one God, serve him in heart, not become Jews, but everybody will recognize, you'll stop being atheists, and then all the nations serving one God. God will build a temple himself without any human intervention, and we will all serve God. Then we will return to the lands. But till that day comes, these 2,000 years, we are to be dispersed amongst the nation, that we should be humbled. A person who has to travel, a wanderer, gets humbled, that it will make us that we should break the haughtiness of us, so to say, and we will hopefully serve God as we are required. And then God will dispatch one that. But he says, being that we're dispersed amongst the nations, it will bring another good will come out of that the nations will see, ideally, when the Jewish people are serving God properly, that they should be able to emulate, learn from the Jewish people to how to be like a light unto the nations, that they should serve God properly. That's what he writes. In other words, it serves a dual purpose, our dispersion amongst the nations. But basically, there's a side issue. Basically, in short, we are as a nation in exile. For 2,000 years, we are expressly forbidden to return and create our own sovereignty. Zionism is a materialistic movement created by non-religious Jews. Their issue was they wanted a national home. Their way of getting legitimacy, of getting backing from the world was very simply, when they convened their meetings in 1890, so far in Switzerland, Basel, Switzerland, they talked about making a nationhood in Uganda, Patagonia next to Brazil. These were lands that were very lush and productive. In those days, you looked at a productive land, a lush land, that was what you felt would be a success for a nation. But then some of their members said, hey, this is not good. We need a mass amount of support from the world to make our own nation. We'll turn to Palestine, even though it's not lush, and it's maybe a lot of dry areas and so forth, but we'll take Palestine, we'll create that as national home, and it's just beautifully prepared that the world will back us, because we'll say, hey, it's the land that God gave to the children of Israel when they left Egypt, and the Christians and evangelistic Christians and all these groups are going to definitely support us. So basically, the world reads the Bible, upholds the Bible in the many religions, and they say, and they always have a soft spot for this, that the children of Israel have to be in more than a soft spot. They have a narrative that there will be an Armageddon, and that there'll be a war even actually between the Muslims and the Jews until everybody will convert to Christianity, whatever it may be, their concepts. But they believe the children of Israel should return to the land of Israel, and so therefore they knew they'll gain millions and millions and millions of people will back their
cause,
their search, their cause, that to be able to make a state of Israel. Now, also, they knew there's many Jews who are Reformed Jews already, who don't know their religion. It was already 50, 100 years, they don't know their religion, they're ignorant, and they'll be able to play on their emotions. 2,000 years we suffer in exile. Wow, this is the land that God gave us, so we'll be able to gain. So they immediately were able to get support of people who suffered in Europe, and play on the emotions. So, except, just let me finish this. So they basically they knew it was a boon for them to turn to Palestine, and they totally ignored what it says in the Torah, the stringent warnings that we are in exile and forbidden to go back there. And they counted on the ignorance of the masses, and that is why Zionism is expressly forbidden according to our religion.
Okay.
You were asking something.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, my understanding when Theodore Herzl, proposed the Zionist state to the World Council of Jews, at the time, very few Jews actually wanted to subscribe to Zionism, and they didn't actually want to do that. They wanted to live in France, they wanted to live in England, and they were there for hundreds of years, and they wanted to be adopted by the country that they lived in. And they said the problem with Zionism is if you say there's this state for us, then they'll all want us to leave, and we don't want to leave. We're very happy here where we are. And if we say this is our homeland, people will say, off you go, get out of here now. You don't need to stay here anymore. Yeah. So a lot of Jews actually opposed the Zionist construct. And I think it all changed after the Second World War, and obviously the Holocaust and the persecution. But am I right that the scales were very different?
Yes. I was trying to give a brief overview, but you're 100% right. The reform movement that started before, that wanted to assimilate, especially the leaders, actually opposed Zionism. Like you were saying, they said, we want to assimilate. They just did, like, so a few people got together and say, hey, we have a new plan. They're working at this 50, 100 years already to gain assimilation, to not to be standing out as a people. Exactly what you're saying. So it's really ironic, because today the reformers are the big backers of Zionism. Why? Because reform does what's convenient. They don't keep the Sabbath. They don't eat kosher, because they do what's convenient. After all, they can play with the religion, they say, because they say it's not from God. Moses gave it. Of course, we call this blasphemy, and we're saying that, we're not allowed to touch the Torah or change it, but we have to uphold every word. But they don't. It's a joke, what they call Judaism. They're just using the name like a facade, the reform. But they were the majority in Europe, because unfortunately so many Jews, the majority left the religion, unfortunately. And from these people, you're right, the leaders of the community and many of the community didn't want to accept Zionism. And in the religious community, the religious Jews that were throughout Europe, very large communities, of course, opposed Zionism because it's blasphemy. It's forbidden. Again, we are to be subservient to God. We're not a nationalism. We're not allowed to leave exile. So it's all was they were ostracized by the religious community. We even put out a book called "The Rabbis Speak Out." Like my hands to it. It's a book that it's a compilation of religious opposition to the state of Israel, to the Zionism, the Zionist movement. It started 130 years ago. It's already old a little bit, this book, so let's say 140 years ago, whatever. And this is a compilation of all the major leading rabbis, of course, there are tens of thousands of others, but the major leading rabbis from every part of the world stood in a fast opposition to this movement. And they said this is blasphemy, heresy, it's all wrong, forbidden to leave exile, forbidden to make our state. And therefore, the Zionists were ostracized from the religious communities and were not accepted by a large contingents of the rest of the Jewish world. Now, what happened was, like you say, after a while, they got backing by Britain, because Britain actually, there's a lot of this history that we can't delve into, but I say, the first president was Chaim Weizmann. And Chaim Weizmann was a scientist, and he came up with like dynamite or something. He discovered some type of he made some discovery of something that they were able to use, and it saved Britain by World War I. And they promised him a reward, and he said, I don't need anything personal, just help us create a Jewish state, the state of Israel. And Britain helped. There was the Balfour Declaration they gave that to help them create a state. They're totally ignoring the religious Jewish communities, both in Palestine. And when I say the religious communities in Palestine, I must tell you that there was three communities living in the Holy Land up to World War I. The first community, the largest community, were the Muslims. The second large community was the Christians. The minority were the Jews. Now, the Muslims obviously didn't want to give up the right to the land for a Jewish state. The Christians didn't either. The Jewish people didn't either. The Jewish community that was living there was a community of hundreds of years living there in total harmony with the Muslims. Why? Because the difference of religion was not an issue of strife, of any type of a rift, any type of non-coexistence, because we were, in fact, the Jewish community that were living there for hundreds of years were the Ivy League of the Jewish communities from around the world. They were the elite, because people who moved to the Holy Land, trickled to the Holy Land throughout the ages, were usually retired rabbis, people who wanted to live off the life in special holiness. If not, they wouldn't go to the Holy Land. Nobody went there for business. They went there so they would take a few of their students. A rabbi would retire, and he would take a few of his major students. They would move up there. And through the years, it became the most God-fearing Jewish community from around the world. And these people were totally not aspiring to make a Jewish state. They were aspiring to live in holiness, and they did. So they lived together with the Muslims, with a distinctly different religion, just as Jews lived in every Muslim country in harmony. So even though we have a distinctly different religion, it was never an impediment to coexistence. They were living there to serve God. So there was the Muslim, the Christian, and the Jewish community all living together in the same courtyards, helping each other, babysitting each other's children without any impediment to peaceful coexistence. Nobody wanted a concept of creating a Jewish state. So when the Zionists came along, they were opposed by all of these three communities. So it's something that wasn't acceptable. And it wasn't only that, but like I say, around the world, all the rabbis and all the communities, they ostracized the Zionism. So from the religious Jewish community, it's across the board not acceptable. I mentioned why we're not allowed to make this state, because we're in exile. But of course, I didn't talk about the elephant in the room. By creating a state, if they would have made it in Uganda, Patagonia, in a desert, we would oppose it full opposition because we're in exile, we're not allowed to have a state. But being that they decided to pick Palestine, we have an issue. Now they're creating it in a land that was inhabited by people, mostly the Muslim community and the Christian community. How dare you take a land from another people? That's stealing and killing. That's against the basics of Judaism. So automatically, all the Torah authorities, all our leaders and our communities, God forbid, we can't steal. That's not Judaism. You're a bunch of crooks. You're a bunch of criminals, what you're doing. So how dare you take that Star of David, take the name of Israel, and claim in our name to create a homeland, a state. So, of course, one of the Zionists' mantras and their propaganda points, in those days, there was no such thing as a podcast. There was no such thing as internet. And even television, I don't think was there at the beginning. And the only people who had a voice was a few news outlets. And some radio programs are very famous. There was a few of them, very few. And the Zionists became friendly with this. I used because they were we never accused them of not being shrewd or not being astute to what they're doing. So they went along and they made sure to tell the world, it's the Jews who want to have a homeland, the Jews have a state, who want to create a state. And they were getting backing from the Western world. Now, when people started saying, hey, how come you're getting some type of opposition? Why are people opposing you there? Oh, they said, these are a bunch of camel riding Bedouins or something. They're just not to be reckoned with. It's a land without a people. It's a land without a people for a people without a land. Support us so people say, but why are people opposing you? Oh, they're just anti-Semites. They don't like Jews. And it's not that we're taking over whole townships, maybe close to 500 towns that they wiped off the map. But this is what they were able, and the world bought their narrative that it's just a bunch of third world camel riding people who are opposing the Jews because they hate the Jews. That is so despicable. That is so unacceptable. Yes.
It's quite, I find that quite a racist kind of accusation, because I agree with you, because at the time, 200 years ago, that culture in Palestine of Arabs and Christians and Muslims and Jews was a very rich tapestry. I mean, that was a very sophisticated cultural place living in harmony. I mean, it was an example to the rest of the world how you can live together in peace.
100%.
And this idea that
That's
it was just a bunch of camel riders and there was no culture, there's no music, there's no literature, there's no poetry, there's no religion, there's no food and cuisine. It was just, there's no such thing as that. It was just an empty land with some camels and, it's just very, very wrong.
Right.
There were towns and villages and cities.
Say. Right. 100%. Yeah. I carry around with the book that I just have with a few, just to show certain points. And here, for instance, you see, this is how we used to live in the same courtyards, babysitting each other's children. This was the life in those days of Jews in harmony and coexistence. So basically, this is exactly what you're saying. It had nothing to. It was an inhabited land. The majority Muslims, second with the Christians and the Jews. All of them were living, and we were living to serve God. And the Zionists come along, this nationalist movement. So there was a total opposition by the Jewish community that was there. And then you were talking about the Holocaust, so I'll just go into that. You're right, that till the Holocaust, they really didn't grab. It didn't, it wasn't so well accepted. I mean, they had the ears of the British leadership, that it was under British mandate, Palestine, after the First World War. And till then, it was under the Ottoman Empire. And again, the Jews thrived under the Ottoman Empire for hundreds of years. We were embraced by the Muslim people. But then the British, again, they went so far as, there's a lot of this history, but we'll get it sage. The Britain gave the Zionists control over the Jewish community. All of these interlopers come along, and the Britain said, okay, Jews, everybody has to register under the Zionist organization. It was like crazy. But we fought that tooth and nail from day one. And whatever they tried to do, we had at that time a chief rabbi in Palestine. It was his name was Rabbi Zonnenfeld of blessed memory in the 1920s. And he met with the king of Transjordan. And he wrote in Arab articles in the Arab newspapers, and he wrote in the Arab League, and he met with the king of Transjordan, and he said, we are totally opposed to the everything that Zionism. It's not us. It's not our Jewish communities. And he pleaded with them, they should understand we're not aspiring. We're not interested in the Temple Mount. We don't want any of this. By the way, the Jews were able to pray by the Temple Mount. Not to go into the Temple Mount. We were able to pray by the Western Wall. Yeah.
Can I quickly just say, so my understanding about the Balfour Declaration is that Lord Balfour promised Lord Rothschild that there would be this Palestinian state. But it was actually quite a devious thing he did, because to fight the Ottomans, he promised the Arabs, the Muslim and Christian Arabs, he said, you help fight with us against the Ottomans and we will give you your independence. And the only reason they were able to defeat the Ottomans was because of all these Arab armies, like you see in Lawrence of Arabia. And if it wasn't for these Arab armies and soldiers, they would never have had their independence. But the truth is, while the British were promising independence to the Arabs, really what they were doing was a deal with the Zionists saying, we'll give you the land. And when they got the mandate from the League of Nations was to help transition these Arabs to have their own independent land. And they had the mandate for over 3 decades. And during that period, rather than helping the Arabs get their independence, what they did was try and increase the immigration of European immigrants from Europe, the Jewish immigrants, and then slowly increase the population, even though it still never became a majority. And then instead of giving the Arabs their independence as they were promised, they gave Israel and the Jews their country, almost betraying the Arabs.
Right.
Is that correct?
It's a lot of it. It seems that is the way they wouldn't. Of course, we can never know, but it seems clear, like you're saying, that they wouldn't have won without that. Of course, we're reluctant to delve into politics issues because I don't know perfectly, but it seems like that's what it seems that the way it was. But when you said to give the Jews, again, we say that, but we point out that the Jewish community that was living there didn't want the Zionists, dead set against it, and so again, the Zionists have a rabbinate and a chief rabbi for window dressing, just like they use the Star of David. But the community that was there was the Eid Chared, this God-fearing community, with their leadership, with their chief rabbis, were totally against it. And in fact, 1947, that rabbi who I pointed out before, Rabbi Sonnenfeld, passed on, and the next chief rabbi was Rabbi Dushinsky of blessed memory. And at that time, the League of Nations, and then there was they turned into, of course, the United Nations. And the United Nations sent a delegation and to see about ratifying the state of Israel. So at the head of the community was Rabbi Dushinsky of blessed memory, and he pleaded with the United Nations that we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. And he was representing the Jewish community, said, we don't want this. It's not us. And then afterwards, the War of Independence, you see the Rabbi Chazan, he was the chief rabbi of the Sephardic. That means communities from we have from Europe, the Ashkenazic land. Sephardic means from Middle Eastern countries and so forth, and Asian countries. And he went out with a white flag in 1948 against the Zionists. The Zionists said, "We'll kill you if you go against us." And he went out and they shot him from the back. They shot him in his leg, and he went out with a flag to the Danes. They assassinated other rabbis who turned the land over. Who said that we want our community to go into Jordan, and that's exactly what happened. Jordan took over the Jewish community in the old city, and since then, I mean, he passed on the history. We've had, here you see demonstrations in the city of Jerusalem. Tens of thousands and more when we took up the next chief rabbi and all our demonstrations. Yeah, this is ongoing. The community is there. And of course, letting immigrants came after the Holocaust, we'll talk about this is in the United States in front of the White House when Netanyahu came to visit the president. And this is constant. We have invariably the very religious community, whatever country they are, the very religious communities are anti-Zionist, anti the state of Israel. The state of Israel is antithetical to Judaism. Judaism is subservience to God, their nationalism, rebelling against God in every facet, trying to leave exiles. They call themselves the beginning of redemption. Everything they do, it's a base rebellion against God, killing, murdering. This is all our hearts cry with the hurt of the Palestinian people and Gaza now. Just I want you to know that we pray, we hurt and we are horrified and just beyond words about what's happening all these years to the Palestinian people in the name of my religion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rabbi, so I just want to clarify.
By the way,
yeah, I was going to say, as someone who used to be a Muslim, I used to read the Quran and I used to read about the history, and I, had a lot of interest in Judaism as well. You say Islam and Judaism and, Christianity are distinct religions. I mean, they have a lot in common. The Quran talks a lot about Jews and all the Jewish prophets who, in Islam, you consider them to be your prophets as well. Muslims look at, Prophet David and Prophet Solomon with just as much respect and reverence as some of the other prophets. They're all very, very important. And they have a lot of things in common, kosher, halal is almost the same. There's a very common foundation, I think, and I think respect.
That's right.
And as a Muslim, when I was growing up, even though I'm not a Muslim now, I still remember very clearly, respect Jews. They were the original ones, from which we have come. And, you need to respect the Jews, and, we respect them so much. You're allowed to marry people of the book. So people of the book were Christians or Jews, because they were felt to be as equals. We shared this common heritage. Right. So I think there was a lot of respect as a Muslim growing up. Not once, I can tell you right now, in my life, have I ever heard personally any Muslim say, hate the Jews, kill the Jews. There was anything but that. There's a lot of love and respect for Jews. Now, and the other reason why there's lots of Jews in now what are historical Muslim countries are because, first of all, before Islam took over much of these countries, actually, there was very many Jews in these areas anyway. For example, there was Jews in Medina, in Saudi Arabia. During the Persian Empire, they took Jews to Iran. And then also when there was the problems in Spain, the Christians took over Spain, they expelled a lot of the Jewish people. And it was the Ottomans and the Arabs who welcomed them in, and they were, came in as courtiers and, financiers and business people and professionals. So they did very well in these countries. So I think that's the historical context. And so it's a shame that nowadays we hear so much about, Muslims and Jews, they hate each other and they want to kill each other. But actually, for centuries, they were living very, very happily together. And I think it's a very false narrative to say that they're, just in their genes to hate each other, because nothing could be further from the truth. I wanted to ask you.
Exactly. Yeah, may I just elaborate on that? That's just like we call the cherry on the cake. While we're so dead set and oppose Zionism, we go out in the streets and let the world know and go with Palestinian demonstrations, because part of our Jewish obligation and our religion is to show gratitude done to us. Exactly what you're saying. Throughout our history, it was the Muslim countries that took us in and showed friendship, and we flourished in all the Muslim countries without any human rights groups to protect us. So how dare the Zionists in their narrative say, it's a religious conflict with the Muslims, it's anti-Semitism against the Jews, they hate the Jews. It's revolting, repugnant to hear such a thing. Therefore we stand up, we scream, it's illegal what they're doing according to Jewish religion. And instead of showing gratitude, they're repaying with bad. How dare they say such a thing to a people that took us in? And so that's just one of the basics why we stand up and scream to the world that what they're doing is horrific, the Zionists, and it's unacceptable. It's a Nakba, criminal. And right now in Gaza, that they're murdering and that daily. We plead with the world. Don't let your intelligence be insulted. You look at history, you'll see that we live together. So it's only the introduction of Zionism that's causing all this death. So how dare you let them? The 1,400 people that were killed, the Jews, we're not condoning violence, but it was purely because of 70. It's not 1,400 now, it's the thousands that were killed in 75 years since they're implementing their forced occupation. Remove it. It's a flawed political stunt that didn't work. Remove it and it will return to peaceful coexistence. Why is the world going in lockstep with the Zionists? And we demonstrated for years in Palestine. We never carry guns. And you can see our history of well over 75 years, how Jews are brutally attacked and beaten simply, and we never militant, we never have guns, because they refuse to accept the Zionists. They get arrested because they refuse to serve in the army. And this is ongoing. If this would happen in any other land, it would be a scandal. But this is daily things that are happening in the Holy Land. They get beaten, run over cars with horses, and it's like we could throw thousands of these pictures simply because we're demonstrating here that with the chemicals, they're spraying them with stink chemicals to destroy the clothes, to discourage demonstrations. Here they're standing in the tens of thousands we have here in the cities of Meir Sharm. It says, stop the massacre, Zionist massacre in Gaza. These are demonstrations that are ongoing, all because we refuse to accept this occupation, and we say it's not Jewish and it's not anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is Zionism in the state of Israel. They cause hate, rift, and bloodshed of both Palestinians, Gaza, refugee camps, West Bank, and Jews. They are the cause of all of this. How the world has to wake up, we plead with the world, to stop the death in Gaza, stop the death of Jews. That's Zionism is anti-Semitic, the personification, the state of Israel. The name should be the state of anti-Semitism.
Wow. So
you were saying you wanted to ask me something.
Yeah, I'm going to ask that in a second, but it's funny. I actually think what's going on right now is actually very harmful for Jews. And, the word anti-Semitic is something that's actually ridiculous, because Semitic people also include the Palestinians. The Palestinians and the Jews are all Semitic people. So it doesn't just apply to Jews. But I think the term anti-Semitic has been used like a, conspiracy theorist. It's just been used now so that the moment you label it on someone, you destroy their character, you cancel them, you discredit them. And, you throw the mud and it sticks. And then it's very difficult to get rid of. Yeah. And people are tired of, people are very fearful of that insult. Everyone is terrified of being called an anti-Semitic. And, I would say even the most so are the people in Germany. The Germans are terrified of being called anti-Semitic. So they will do anything possible to show, look, we are not anti-Semitic, even if it means supporting actions which are clearly wrong. And I think currently what the Israeli regime, the government there is doing is very, very anti-Jewish, because basically what they're doing is promoting anger and hatred towards the Jewish people, even though it's not the Jewish people who are doing this, it's a government. And I don't know if you know me, Rabbi, but I'm someone who is very anti-government. I don't think any government in the world is actually an organization that cares for its people. Governments care about themselves and their benefactors, and they enrich themselves and they make the public poor. Governments are not there. They're not our friends. And whether it's an Israeli government or a Hamas government, they don't really care about their people. That's my personal take on politics. And the problem is the actions that Israel's... Sorry?
Yeah, I'm saying, well, I like you say, I go on all... We go to different programs and different around the world and everything, because we want simply we don't have to share the views of everybody that we go to. So as a Jew, we have to be loyal citizens in every country. That's what God requires of us, and pray for the well-being of the governments that we are, except of course the state of Israel, which is a direct rebellion against God. But so we don't share the views a lot of the people we go to, but we go because we want the world to hear that it's not a religious conflict. And by the way, the Holocaust that you're talking about, my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. In our communities, where many of us are survivors and children of survivors of the Holocaust, the majority of my family were killed, and my father escaped from Hungary when the Nazis came in. So we feel but it's abhorrent to take the Holocaust, where Jews suffered and they died because they're Jews, and to use that as a tool to intimidate and silence opposition in order that they should implement their criminal occupation of another people. And as Jews, we stand up and declare the most vociferously with all the strength that we have that it is unacceptable, that it's criminal, it's an act, but we will not be silent with God's help. And we plead with the world to stop playing the game of the Zionists, where more death and suffering for 75 years, and now the colossal deaths in Gaza. They must stop. The world is sensible people. They should stop supporting this. Please have compassion and let's bring an end to this terrible quagmire, to this terrible river of blood, by simply removing the impediment to peace, the Zionist state of Israel. It seems like it's crazy. It's not crazy. We lived for hundreds of years together. South Africa, the apartheid was able to be stopped. They're only living and breathing because they're like a leech. They're gaining all the guns and all their armor and all the money from other countries. If the world would just ostracize them, put them, in a minute they would dry out with God's help. So we're saying, we urge everybody to pray to God. He's the Almighty, to bring a speedy and peaceful conclusion, end of the occupation. But stand up and do like God wants of us, to all your power, plead with the leaders to stop this occupation.
So I know some Jewish people, and they're lovely, and some of them would say to you, what you're suggesting is terrible. I'll read a comment from someone I know very well. So I suggested a solution, and he didn't like it. I suggested that there should be a united republic of Israel and Palestine, and everyone should live in peace and harmony. It should not be a religious state. It should be one of coexistence. And he said, no. He said, you just don't get it. He said, your understanding of history is so poor that I'm not going to engage in this conversation further. You're advocating nothing less than the end of the Jewish state, and on that we must part ways. So that was the last I heard. So
yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, again, from whom is he speaking his opinions? His personal opinions. So what does that have to do with my Jewish religion? How dare they use my Jewish religion because he has his ideology? How dare they use as a identity card the Jewish religion to further a point that he holds? Without even getting into a discussion if it makes sense what he's saying, it's simply, you have no right to use a religion that clearly disqualifies and says you're not allowed to make a Jewish state, you're not allowed to kill or steal, and you have to show, as I say, gratitude to people. This is all wrong. It's unacceptable. You want a Jewish state, so how dare you come make it in the heads of shoulders of another people? First of all, secondly, it's not a Jewish state because it's in and of itself, it's contradictory. Judaism says we are in exile for 2,000 years. If he's a religious Jew, it's like saying I'm going to be Jewish, but I'm going to bow to Buddha. I'm going to be religious, but I'm not need kosher. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And that said, and then he wants. Jewish state, it's all not Jewish, but it happens to be that it's, like you said, detrimental to Judaism also, because if you're not protecting yourself, you're incurring the hate of people with every death of a family, all the other members of the family. It's just illogical also. But I don't even have to speak about it. It's just religion. Rabbi, that doesn't make sense.
Rabbi, would you be more happy if it was say, for example, United Republic of Israel and Palestine, and it was not a Jewish state? It was a multi-ethnic, multi-faith.
It's a good question.
Secular state.
Yes. If we, I said with God's help, it's the law of Judaism is to be loyal citizens in every country. If Sudan, if any other country, United States, decides that they wanted a democracy, they wanted the Jews, they wanted a democratic type of life, so be it. There would be loyal citizens under a democracy, not as Palestinian Israel. No. As the word Israel is first of all, they've already disqualified the name Israel, so that would have connotations of that we should have a dual ownership of something because Theodor Herzl and these heretics decided so. If they want to make a democratic state, and we humbly ask them that we can live amongst them, as we would love to live amongst them. If they want to make a religious Muslim state, so that's their prerogative, it's their land. We would be loyal citizens. Just like in Iran, you have the Islamic Republic of Iran, and contrary to the Zionist propaganda, they clearly state, the Ayatollah Khomeini said it, and it's in his writings, and they continue it today, they have nothing against Jews or Judaism. They, on the contrary, they support and help the synagogues and the teachings. What they say is, we do not accept Zionism and occupation. That is why the Zionists hate Iran, because they undermine their legitimacy. They say, we have nothing against Jews. We are against this criminal occupation. That's why they hate Iran so much. That's what they threaten. So basically, if it would be an Islamic country, fine. Anything that would be what the people of they want, we would accept, because it's their prerogative to do whatever type of country they want. We would be amongst them, and it could be peaceful, whether it's an Islamic state, whether it's a democracy. We can live peacefully. Everything has its. If it would be Islamic state, there would be less immorality than if it's a democracy. By the way, but anyway, basically, that's not our issue. Our issue is that we're forbidden to have a state, and we can live in peace. And if they would have the world would have the respect. Just like you're not going to dictate for Christianity what Christianity is. You turn to the priests and the popes and whatever. If you turn to the religious, real leaders of the world, around the world, the very religious community, they're scholars, that they'll say, we want to live under the rule of the Palestinian people, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter. And we can't live in peace.
Rabbi, a lot of Israelis will turn around and say, Palestinians hate us. They want to kill us. And, if they took over, they would exterminate all of us. Do you not think that's a valid fear?
Well,
a lot of the Israelis that are growing up in school, they're taught that the Palestinians hate them, that they want to kill them, that they want to exterminate them. This is what they're told. And, and it's not helped. And there are some Palestinians and Hamas who go, we want to kill, the Jews, and we want to, do this. So, you can see why there would be some concern.
Yeah, I mean, of course I see why. I'm not here. This is a picture. I mean, we meet with I believe we were in Lebanon. We met with the heads of Hezbollah. This is Ismail Haniyeh, the prime minister, both prime minister of Hamas, yes, of the government in Gaza. And he presented us with the needlework of Palestine, basically, and he declared, like the heads of Hezbollah and everybody said, we are not against Jews. So you told me in their what they wrote years back in their writing that at that time they wrote Jews or something, but they clearly state that they don't mean that, they mean Zionism, because sometimes they didn't. That's the problem. We always urge people to be clear to say Zionism, not Jew. That's not a Zion. It's not a Jewish state. It's Zionism, and they are clear in that. So they even changed their original mandate or whatever, their
covenant or whatever,
statement of independence, covenant, whatever. So they even changed that because of this issue. So they're very clear. They have nothing against Jews. If the leadership, and we went to Gaza, we went to, like I said, we went to Lebanon, and we have. Mingle with them constantly. I was just in Washington. We have maybe, 100,000 people protesting. So these are more the activists, people that really bothers what's happening. Everybody was friendly to us. And we were in Iran. We spent weeks there many times. We went to every different country. Everybody is clear that they're not against Jews. And everybody knows their history, that we live together in peace. Now, is there people that maybe developed because unfortunately the murder of their relatives and the torture and so forth, and there are people, or maybe because they are ignorant of the issues and they think Zionism and Judaism is the same. There will be such people. There are such people. But being that this is under a leadership, just like in South Africa, people said it would be impossible to bring the parties together, bring the blacks and whites together, and then once it was totally obliterated. I mean, it was just wiped off the concept of in the minds of people of that you had in South Africa, the mindset of the people that it had to be ended, and now they're living together in total peace, right? So this is a fact that is a lot of. It's just. It's their propaganda issue. We can live together. The leadership and all the people want to live together. There are people who may feel that they're not safe. They may be, and they're true. There may be people who committed atrocities, who are maybe running the prison camps over there, the Israeli prison camps. There are people who committed atrocities, and that, let's say there's thousands of such people. So then America gives billions and billions every year, and other countries give billions of dollars to Israel for their war machines. So instead of just going into this black hole of giving every year more and more to destruction, let these thousands of people who feel unsafe, let them be reestablished in the United States and Canada and in England, wherever they want. They should get these thousands of people we're talking about. The rest of the people will find that we can live together. There will be a big peace convention conference where all the leaders will get together, the Palestinian leaders, where they'll profess and they'll declare we're not against Jews and we want to live in peace. You will see that because it's our history. History shows, again, before there was any human rights groups, we lived in peace with a distinctly different religion. Why cannot that come about? Just like the apartheid in South Africa, people said it's impossible to change because of so much hate developed. It was ended, and everybody lives in peace. Why can't? It's so simple. It's so logical what I'm saying. And again, these thousands of people, let's say tens of thousands. I don't think it's tens of thousands. You will see that it won't be tens of thousands. But let's say tens of thousands of people say they feel unsafe. Why can't America and England, they'll open the border? It's big enough, the land. Canada and all these lands are big enough to take in a few 10,000s of people. And what would be the problem? We will have peace. But I want to just make one clause here. No matter what, you may say, I don't believe what you're saying is illogical, whatever it is. But first of all, the world has to know when the Zionists came and they took the name of Judaism to occupy land, what they did was stole our name. What they did is rebel against God. It is unacceptable. Judaism and Zionism is diametric opposites. Now we may have a problem. We have to work out that it should be a peaceful. But let's not state that we have to correct an issue that developed because Zionism and Judaism as a religion came and had the right to take the land, and we have to figure out how to solve certain problems. No. You are criminals. You occupied a land. You stole the name of Judaism. You killed Arabs and killed Jews who stood up against you. You killed and you maimed and you caused the death and suffering of all the people who went along because of idealism, followed your story. So Arabs and Jews all died because of the occupation. Let's work out how we can solve this problem. The world keep on following in the lockstep of the Zionists, and they're supporting the bombing of Gaza because they're going to wipe out Hamas as if Hamas is the issue. Before we speak about Hamas, we're not condoning violence. How dare you speak about Hamas when 1,400 people you're shocked were killed? 1,400 people died because just like 75 years people died in the Anti-Intifada, people died in suicide bombs. Every time you're saying, oh, it's the PLO, it's this, it's that. Why are the people losing their common sense? They're following the Zionists, their vicious mantras, their vicious propaganda spiels. It's because you're occupying a people against the will of the Muslim, Christian, Jewish community and against God. God says, why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful. Remove this impediment to peace. You're forcing a square into a circle. Remove this, we'll have peace.
Rabbi, I really do get that. I think it's awful, the 1,400 people that died. But, I was thinking, if I was living in Israel, I'd be like, why? Why do they hate us so much? Why do the Palestinians hate us? Why are they killing us? Why are they doing this? And the thing is, it's a 75-year history, 75-year plus history. And people need to know the context of everything. These people, are occupied and they're resisting. And some of them are doing things that are very wrong and very bad. And I'm not condoning them. But you need to understand the context of the suffering to understand, and only if you understand, then can you start looking for some solutions. Rabbi, can I ask you a few questions?
And bombing, yeah.
So can I quickly ask you some questions?
Bombing every day, they bomb a person. They're making more enemies. I mean, it's ridiculous. What they're doing is horrific. It's against God. It's against everything.
Absolutely. I have to admit, I've tried my best to stop looking at the videos. It's been coming up on my Twitter and on Instagram. I've seen so many young Palestinian children now dead, limp, being carried by their parents. Young children screaming and crying, saying, "Daddy, Mommy, wake up." It's breaking my heart. Yeah. And I think, what are these? It's impossible. How are these people going to feel? of course they're going to feel anger and hatred towards Israel and Jews, because all they know is that these people hate us. These people want to kill us. They want to destroy us. So you're just creating this cycle of hatred and death, and it's very, very sad.
100%. 100%.
It makes my heart, honestly, it makes my heart weep.
It's a nakba.
The thing is,
yes, it's our hearts are rent in the Jewish communities. You have no idea. We go around. This is 75 years in our synagogues, and now we speak about this. We are emotionally spent. We are frustrated beyond and humiliated beyond words. What's being done in our name every time we heard another bombing, another hurt, another, and now it's just a culmination. This now what's happening in Gaza, and the world is sitting by silently and saying, yes, they can bomb because they want to wipe out Hamas. God help us. How could they say that? When Hamas is like is the government there. In other words, you have the right to free pass to bomb all the medical offices, the civil offices, everybody, because it's part of the regular government. I mean, it solves the logic of the world, and it can only be when we say that the Satan is driving them, because it's beyond human logic to understand what's happening here. And while we are obligated, every human being with a heart, to stand up and plead with everybody. Somehow anybody has a connection with leaders to have them stop immediately what they're doing and really ultimately bring a free Palestine. That's the solution.
Well, what's really sad is, Rabbi, you speak from your heart and you clearly care about humanity and you have a love of humanity. We're living in an age where it's all about being polarized. You're either in this camp or that camp. And it's not that simple. And I hate the fact people are making it into this simple thing. You either stand with us or you're standing with them. And there's this bloodlust and anger and hatred for the others. And I thought during the pandemic, it was bad, where if you didn't take the vaccine, this experimental vaccine, you were seen as being, less than human. You were vilified, you're called names, anti-vaxxer, you weren't able to work or travel. And now from that kind of polarization, now it's become, are you standing by Israel or are you standing by Hamas? And it's like, no, I stand by humanity. I don't want to stand by any of these. Now, one of the things that is definitely true is there is definitely anti-Semitism. There are people out there who do not like Jews, who have theories about Jews. For example, I've seen things where they say, oh, the Jewish people, they think of the Goy as subhuman and that they should rule the world over us and that we are, just like rats and dirt. Can you just clarify, is there anything like that in the Jewish text saying that, non-Jewish people are subhuman and inferior and worthy of being treated badly?
100% not. You should know that plays into Zionism. I mean, even the Zionists love anti-Semitism. When there was in France that the bombing, the shooting in the supermarket, so Netanyahu came running to France and he said, "Oh, everybody should move to Israel." In fact, there's a book called Ben Gurion Scandals, where Gilad, I believe his name's, I'm forgetting, Ben Gurion Scandals, Giladi, I think, he wrote the book where he was an Iraqi child, and we're talking, I think it's the 1950s, and he became a Zionist as a youth. A lot of his youth are rebels to their parents. His parents pleaded with him that he shouldn't join the Zionists, and they secretly put bombs in synagogues in order to create fear and panic that the Arabs are doing that. And they actually bombed. We have books written about what the Zionists actually bombed the Atlanta. Haganah did it in the ports of whether it's Haifa or something, by the ports going to Palestine. Because the more the Jews died, and in Hitler, we have a book, the Holocaust Victims Accused, where basically clearly the Zionists were colluded with the Nazis. They wanted Jews to die because they said the more to the victor goes the spoils, they said. They knew that when the Western world will win the war, then they'll, out of sympathy, they'll help support creating of a Jewish state. So Zionism lives off the blood of Jews that died. And we have these documents to show this. I have it in our books. But basically, I'm going to go back to the main issue that you're saying, that of these anti-Semitic issues that people say that Jews, consider like rats and all these whatever you were saying. Clearly in our Torah, we believe that everybody, on the contrary, everybody was created by God. We are to show respect. We are to sympathize, visit the sick, provide, give charity, help. And if you will notice that many of the large hospitals and so forth, you'll see wards and the dedications to Jewish people, totally, or you go to Africa, you can find this totally within our Jews. This is what our Jewish upbringing is, that we believe everything's created by God and we're required to help and assist. Just like Abraham, our patriarch, says in the Torah, he gave food and so forth. That's what's required of us. Is there a difference between every religion believes what they're doing is right? Yes, we believe that we should be, God sent us, we should be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. We believe by constantly serving God, and we have this covenant with God, that we are elevated by this. We are a kingdom of priests. Just like you look up at your priest as a holy person, we believe, we say God sent us, you should be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, that we're required 24 hours, like I say, when we're not sleeping or eating and working, we have to be studying the Torah. It's required. We're never allowed to just go without doing anything in the Torah. It's required of every man. It's considered by us an obligation. So we consider ourselves that we should be, ideally, a nation of priests and a holy nation. Is that, do we consider that an elevation? Yes, we consider. But that doesn't mean that we look at other people as, we look at the derogatory. We look at them as people created by God that have to serve God, and basically we have to be kind and friendly and help and assist. And God forbid not to do any. If a child of ours steals something, takes a candy when we're going into a store, he sees a candy, takes a candy. You will hear a Jewish person from the religious community will say that you're doing a chilul Hashem, you're desecrating God's name by doing a sin. By stealing, they won't even say you're not allowed to steal. They'll say it also, but they'll say it's a chilul Hashem. What are you acting up? Why are you screaming? It's because we believe that we have required to be a light, a beacon to the nations, that they should to serve God also. But again, like every religion believes what they're doing is right, it brings close. We believe it's what we're doing is a holiness, but that does not mean that we look at another nation. So people twist this concept. And they make it like, and of course, it's the Zionists who love this, that we should be considered, different in order that to create agitation. And then there are people throughout the world, through the generations, have blood libels and things that are just off the wall, things that are totally false, like, things that are crazy and really malicious, like that Jews want to kill people and that Jews want to drink the blood. Blood by us is totally forbidden. Even in animals, we have to salt the meat and everything because we're not allowed to. Blood is considered totally not kosher. So, I mean, the concepts that they made these blood libels are ironic because it's totally forbidden for us. Even animals' blood is forbidden for us. So it's just crazy stuff. But still in the world, there's always, Zionism exacerbates anti-Semitism. There is a concept of anti-Semitism against Jews throughout the generations. And like I said, the Muslims helped the Jews when there was anti-Semitism. But Zionism is the creator almost of the anti-Semitism in this generation. And certainly the exacerbator of anti-Semitism. Their state really should be called the state of anti-Semitism.
Some people also argue, Rabbi, that this idea of returning to the homeland is nonsensical because a lot of the European Jews aren't even genetically from the Middle East. They're from Khazaria or some area in modern Ukraine. Do you believe in that? That a lot of the European Jews came from that? A large group of people who actually converted to Judaism who are not genetically from the land of the Holy Land? Is that actually true?
First of all, the whole thing of returning, again, remember what I said, we're forbidden to return en masse to the Holy Land. That's first of all. So the whole Zionist issue of returning is forbidden for us. And you can even see that the communities for 2,000 years, many Jews had the opportunity to go up. They didn't go up. Even though every Jew says on the Passover, which is our holiday to remember the leaving, that God took us out of Egypt, we finish the ceremonies of the Passover night, the big night. We say, the coming year to Jerusalem. Everybody says that. The Zionists use that to mean that they should make their state. But every Jewish child knows it. They never ask their fathers, how come you don't buy a plane ticket and go? He said it last year, coming here in Jerusalem, why don't you buy it? Because everybody, we know in our religion, it means that when God will make a metaphysical change, where all humanity will serve God. It doesn't mean this physical, we're yearning for a piece of real estate. It means the closeness to God that we're lacking, that we would love that God should bring us back to serve with what He will build a temple without any human intervention. So we have that concept, first of all. Now, most of the Jews, we never have any gap in history. So all through the generations, there was a taking of the Torah. 2,000 years ago, there was a war, the Romans and then the Greeks. We were defeated as a nation because of our sins, we believe, and we were taken into slavery, servitude, and we were spread out throughout the world. Some to Yemen, a lot to Germany or whatever it may, Ashkenaz, that's called Germany, and a lot to other lands, Iraq, which is Babylon, and we were spread out amongst the world. So we had millions of people. These millions of people didn't disappear into thin air. They have children and grandchildren and great. So we are mostly not from the Khazars. Was there a country called Khazar? Yes. And there was a king of Khazar who converted to Judaism. So there was this group of people that converted. That's not a big issue by us. And in fact, most of the people, until World War II, certainly, we had our genealogy written by many people. And even a lot of us still do, because we're people of the book. There's many books that are written by thousands, hundreds, maybe hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands, at least, of books that we have, and are written a lot of times in the back, our genealogy. So we have our genealogy written that goes back all the way to the tribes, basically. So we have our genealogies that are not from the Chazaras, and we know our genealogy to a large extent from different people, different tribes, different things. So it's this what people say is Chazaras. That said, if somebody converts to Judaism, anybody can convert to Judaism. He becomes a full-fledged Jew. It's not contrary to what people believe. Yes, a person can convert to Judaism if they want to. We discourage people from converting because we say, for two reasons. In the law books, it say we should discourage somebody from converting. Why? Because everybody's created by God. Everybody can serve God if he wants to. We believe he should keep the 7 commandments of Noah. It's called to believe in one God, not to worship idols, not to kill, not to steal, not to commit adultery, not to eat from an animal before it's totally dead, not to eat a live limb or something, and to have a court system in every country that you're residing, that there should not be the Wild West, it should be peace. So these 7 commandments, one upholds the 7 commandments
well,
of
then
Noah,
I'm a Jew then.
He will inherit the world to come. So we believe, if somebody believes just to this thing, doesn't worship idols, believe in God, will do the 7 commandments, not that many. He's a righteous person. He will inherit the world to God. He will inherit the world to come. You don't have to be Jewish to serve God. So that's why we tell people,
I love that.
To become Jewish, that's a fact. It's called the commandments of Noah. And now, if somebody becomes Jewish, he has to uphold 613 commandments. Not all apply to everybody. There's certain that have to with men, certain women. There's many different laws, whatever. But so we discourage, because if somebody is going to convert to Judaism, and anybody can, then if he does not uphold the laws, he'll be considered a sinner. So we don't want to create sinners. So we discourage people from becoming Jewish. That said, so usually what communities do is they tell the person to practice it for a full year or something and see if he still has that vigor, that will to do it. Because a lot of times people see something that looks intriguing, that has this, and they want to do it, and they get this, like, you want to do exercise, and you buy a treadmill. And then you got expensive treadmill, and then a month later you find it collecting dust, right? So we say to people, practice it for a year or something. It's not required according to Judaism, but they should do it. And if they still feel they really want to, then the rabbis will convert them to Judaism, and then become a full-fledged Jew. But we try to discourage because we're afraid that we will create a sinner. He will become a Jew, and once you convert it, there's no such thing as a refund. You don't get like 30-day refund. You converted, you're a full Jew. So we're afraid that he will be creating a sinner. So we try to discourage. That's law. Now, in law books, it says to discourage somebody from becoming.
That makes sense.
There's a second reason. There's a second reason that we discourage people from becoming Jewish, because we believe that God, because that we're supposed to be a nation, a holy nation, a nation of priests, that God a lot of times judges us more stringently. And therefore we have that the anti-Semitism through the ages, and that Jews suffered. And we don't want a person to suffer. So we say, if you're going to become Jewish, you may suffer along with Jews. Like you had the Holocaust, and we believe God is perfect and God is compassionate. We don't question why God brought this about. We try every generation, when something happens, whether it's a plague, a tsunami, or anti-Semitism, we try to be introspective and see why this came about. Here, Zionism, we know what it comes out, and we know, that Zionism causes hate, and that Zionism, and it says in the Torah, if you try to leave exile, you'll be hunted like animals. It'll bring colossal suffering. So basically, but putting this on the side, we tell a person, if you're going to become Jewish, you may suffer, God forbid. So we don't want them to suffer, and we don't want people to sin. So that's these two major reasons why we tell people, we discourage people from becoming Jews. That said, anybody who wants to convert Jews has the right to convert. That's basically issue.
Rabbi,
I wanted to bring back.
That was a great answer, and I didn't appreciate that. One of the things I have with some religions are where they say it's our way or the highway, and if you don't follow us, you're being damned to hell and damnation. And I've really struggled with organized religion with that respect, because I think God is very forgiving. He is not human. He has so much compassion and love. He is not going to be so petty as to say, "Oh, well, you don't follow that religion, then you're going to burn in hell forever, eternally." I think I follow your way of thinking that God is compassionate, and here are the guidelines, and if you follow them, then you will be a good person, hopefully, and God will look kindly upon you. Yeah. I think that's beautiful what you've just described. Yeah. I think 100 years ago, most Jews were like you in your thinking and anti-Zionist. Unfortunately, things have changed in 100 years. And if there's 15 million Jews in the world and 150,000 Jews that think like you, that means you only represent 1%.
There's many more.
Is there more?
No. First of all, certainly. First of all, I don't know the statistics in numbers, but like I said, the rule is that the more the religious the Jew, the more anti-Zionist, the more they know the religion. And you'll find that you're in England, you go to Stanford Hills, and that's the most religious Jewish community. You'll see there's not one flag. I believe there's not one flag when I was there. But, I don't know. Some may find one here, one there, maybe. But as a general rule, you'll find that there's almost no flags. So you won't find an Independence Day parade that they don't celebrate the state. They're opposed because the more the religious, like I say, it's so contradictory, so antithetical in every aspect of Zionism. It's not Judaism, it's a heresy, it's a rebellion. So that you will find in Jerusalem, in Mea Sha'arim, in all the Bnei Brak, wherever there's a very religious community, that anti-Zionist. Now, that said, because of the vicious attacks of the Zionists against the religious communities, against Jews. And as I've showed you the pictures, they brutally beat.
It's happening now. It's happening now. I've seen pictures. I've seen pictures of Orthodox Jews and videos of them being beaten up in the West Bank. Now,
all the time. All the time.
Beaten up by the cops and the police.
For no reason. We're not carrying guns. What are they going to claim? The Palestinians, they have the story. They're a bunch of terrorists. They're a bunch of animals. They're disgusting to hear what they say, that what goes out of spews out of the bile that spews out of the mouths of the Zionists. But the religious Jews, what is the story with us? We're not militant. Maybe they're standing on the streets. They stand on the streets. They carry signs like we do. We're Jews. We're not Zionists. We oppose the occupation. So that comes us that we should be brutally beaten, broken down, the bones broken, arrested, and so forth. But and murdered, assassinated. Our rabbis were assassinated from way before the state was created. They assassinated rabbis and other people who stood up in opposition. So because of this, there are many people. The majority of Jews who are anti-Zionist do not speak up. When I say the majority, I mean the vast majority. Nobody, you have to understand. I mean, I'm not condoning that they're not speaking up. The person should be speaking up. The chief rabbi of Palestine, who passed away in now it's already over 30 years. His name was Rabbi Keitelbaum of blessed memory. Moved out of the state of Israel. He was of occupied Palestine. He moved to New York, and he remained with the title chief rabbi, and he urged his followers and people who listened to him, please leave. Don't be under the occupation, because you don't know how you're supporting them just by being there. Even though our communities don't take funding from the state, we are totally estranged. We don't vote. We have nothing to do with them. But still in all, he said, living there itself, really, you don't have, many people tried to leave. Throughout these years, and we assist people leaving, but first of all, you can't get visas. A Jew he can't live without kosher food. He can't live without the education of his children. And so he has to move to some place that has true Jewish teaching and all these trappings of a Jewish community. And when they want to move to London, they want to move to US, they want to move to Canada, there is such blocks. We have every single individual costs tens of thousands of dollars of lawyer fees and things to be able to get for them a visa to be able to move. So it's almost impossible. They try for all these years, Jews, and they trickle out. It's tens of thousands that moved out, but still in all, the majority of Jews are living there quietly. It's like the invisibles living there, not supporting the state, and there's hundreds of thousands living there. We have hundreds of thousands around the world who are, but from the religious. Now, I'm not talking about the not religious Jews who are simply, like they say, also it's against our religion. And they're not coming from the depth of religion. They just say it's against Judaism, they know, or they say it's against human rights. These Jewish activists who are not religion. There's many of these people. You will see they're at the forefront, actually, of the movements a lot of times of opposition to the Zionist state. They were in the forefront. A lot of times these people were in the forefront of the movement of the oppression of black people in the United States. They were in the front, and they were murdered. That were people, they were very famous, people who went to the South to help the blacks when they were being oppressed, and they were killed. And they were Jewish people. So Jews a lot of times are out there in the front. And but again, I'm basically talking from our religion, that our religion is against the state, and many hundreds of thousands are against it. Just you don't hear their voices.
No, I agree.
Chief Rabbi of Palestine. The chief rabbi of Palestine, Rabbi Keitelbaum, urged his followers to go out. He said, at the cost of your lives. They tried to assassinate him, by the way. And our rabbis, like I say, get beaten. We went out this last week, 2 weeks ago. The tires were slashed. The mirror was broken. The car was keyed, and we were, and the people of Jerusalem went out to demonstrate. They were arrested in the middle of the night. They broke into the homes and they were arrested for simply going out now and viciously, more than usual. They went out. They broke up their apartment. So that's the story.
The problem is, I think that's what people don't understand. That on the mainstream media, you get this impression that all Muslims are the same, all Arabs are the same, all Jews are the same. But actually, it's such a mixed bag of people with different views and different political views and different religious views. And I know of Jews who are in Israel who really don't like Netanyahu, who really don't like the government, who really don't like the Zionist policies and the way they treat the Palestinians in the occupied territory. And they're absolutely terrified of saying anything. And now recently there's been a law passed in Israel where if you say anything that will damage the morale of the country, the police or the army can come and take you away and lock you up. I mean, that is absolutely terrifying. Right. And I've seen people, Orthodox Jews being beaten up recently in Hebron and other areas of the West Bank purely for just standing there and saying we don't believe in the Zionism. And, that's what I think a lot of people in the mainstream media, in the West don't appreciate, that there is this divergence of thought in the Jewish community, and not everyone is a Zionist. And simply questioning Israeli government policy doesn't make you anti-Semite. Can I just share a story with you, Rabbi? I think you might like this. So I told you I grew up in Scotland. And one of the earliest memories I have is sitting at the back of my dad's shoe shop. And in the 1980s, I was only 6 or 7. My dad would tell us all these stories about what it was like for him. And one of the stories involved a Jewish man. And my dad explained that in the 1970s, it was very tough for him as a brown Pakistani Muslim man. He was trying to open up a shoe shop. But at the fair where you would go to all the different shoe companies and try and buy produce, none of them would sell to him because he was a Pakistani Muslim. They would say, we don't sell to blacks or browns or Muslims. And then there's a Jewish man there. I think his name was Steinberg. I'm not 100% sure. And Alan Steinberg, I can't remember. Anyway, something like that. He came up to my dad and said, "Are you having problems?" And my dad said, "Yes." And this Jewish man said, "It used to be like this for Jews too. It used to be no black, no Jew, no Muslim, no Indian, whatever." He goes, "Now I am allowed to buy the shoes. And if I can help you, I will." And my dad said, "How?" He said, "You tell me what shoes you want to buy. I will buy them for you. You don't need to pay me any money. I will give you the shoes. You will sell the shoes. And if you can make profit, fantastic. Pay me back for the cost of the shoe. And if you can give me like a 5% margin or something, I will be grateful." And my dad said, "Hold on 1 second. You're going to buy the shoes for me, and you don't want me to pay a penny until I've sold the shoe." And this guy said, "Yeah. And if you don't sell anything, give it back to me. You don't need to pay for it. I'll deal with it." And my dad was like, "This is an amazing deal for me." And he said, I just want to help you out. We're people of the book." So my dad then had this amazing relationship with this Jewish man who helped my dad get on his feet. And eventually my dad, who used to just do the markets, then had a shoe shop. And there was a Jewish man who got him into that position to do that. And he said, and my dad said, "In the end, I would just send a blank check to my friend. I said, I don't know how much this I owe you. You just write the figure and take the money." Blank check. He would send him a blank check.
Right.
This is the trust and love that was there. So when I hear people say, "Oh, Muslims hate Jews and Jews hate Muslims," I'm like, well, that definitely goes against the first memory that I ever had. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I have so many Jewish friends and Muslim friends. So this whole idea that Jews hate Muslims and Muslims hate Jews is absolute nonsense. It's garbage. And I do not believe in it. Anyway, I need to.
Let me tell you something. I have a white beard. God should give me long years. I could tell. I've heard so many stories, both Jews and from Muslims. Every old person living in any of the Arab and Muslim countries will tell you stories. I have so many stories like that. Thank God. I go. I'm living there like a half an hour from Patterson, New Jersey, very Clifton, Patterson. It's the second largest in the United States, or maybe the largest community of Muslims. And we go there, and people would come over to me and tell me, these nice, beautiful, anecdotes of their family. I've heard it so many times. And from Jewish people, the same. Like I always repeat, we babysat each other's children. When the Jews had to go to the synagogue, the Arab neighbors would babysit their most precious object. And I could tell you so many stories in the middle of this horrific, before 1948, when there was tremendous tension. One of my older rabbis, he just passed away actually a few months ago, and he lived in the old city. Prior that and he told the story how that his mother hung out some of the clothes to dry, whatever it was, to didar. I think it was dyed. Actually, it had to be hung out to dry, and some Arab little boy came by, threw it down or something, and he said his father saw this. The father of this Arab, he started chasing. He's going to kill you. He tells the Arab kid, he said, "You're going to be chasing him. How dare you do such a thing? Because how dare you, do something bad to a Jewish, neighbor?" They were in the total peace. He said a similar story that one of the ladies had an apple. Like a basket of apples was thrown over. Again, like the father kept chasing this kid who did it, because the kids, unfortunately, see the agitation and they would do things, but the parents didn't let this happen. And in Patterson, there's a big store that sells trinkets, and the guy told me that the day he had to start school, they were a very poor family, so his Jewish neighbor came and bought him a khakis and clothes, like in a little briefcase, to go to school. He said, I could tell more. We constantly lived in total harmony. It's just revolting and repulsive and hurtful, so much hurt to hear the new narrative that is like an ingrained hate between Jews and Muslims, and it's just because of the religious conflict, when it's totally nothing to do with that, and it's all false. But Zionism, unfortunately, does create in some people to have this hate, but it's something that could be remedied and could be. But to say they're going to kill Hamas is like putting a Band-Aid on a hemorrhaging wound. It may look clean for a couple of hours, but what's going to be down the road? First of all, it's a murder, but they're killing the people in Gaza. Even if there's no excuse because they say Hamas. And what's going to be down the road? The more people they kill, like you say, it's what's the family that lives afterwards, the remaining and the maimed. They're living. Right now, they're lying in excruciating pain. They don't have anesthesia. They don't have medication. I mean, it's beyond, like you say, you don't like to look at it. It's beyond comprehension. It's beyond humanity. We really have to stop that. We have to be able to live together. The story that you told is so beautiful. We have to live together. That's what God wants of us. How do we allow this Zionist entity? It's a selfish, flawed entity. How do we let them dictate to the world to do such stupidity, such horrific actions? What's happening now?
Oh, I need to go pick up my children from school now, so I have to stop. I'm so sorry. I just want to say, Rabbi Dovid Weiss, thank you so much for spending your time talking to me. It's been a real pleasure. And my heart is honestly filled with so much warmth. I can sense your decency, your integrity, your morals. You're a good human being. You're a God-fearing man. And God willing, there will be peace amongst the people. God willing. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, my friend.
What was your father's name, if I may ask? What was your father's name?
His name was Mahmoud Malik. He passed away a few years ago.
And this was in Scotland?
Yes, in Scotland.
And this was in Scotland?
Yes.
Yeah, I was, by the way, just in Scotland. I went on a tour. I spoke in Scotland, by the way. I was in Wales and Scotland, and I spoke here. Thank you. The story, just for the story alone, it's my breakfast. It's here in the morning, but it's a beautiful tale, and God should help that should be the continuing fabric and story that we should be able to have an ongoing. In the future, God should help. And God should help with His compassion, bringing a free Palestine, a free Gaza, a free Palestine. And ultimately, He should reveal His glory. All humanity will serve Him in harmony. Thank you so very much. Please spread our word and contact us again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everyone, I'm going to put the list and website and details, everything on my website and the thumbnail. So if you want any details, let me know. And Rabbi, once again, thank you so much. And if you ever visit London, I'm just outside. Let me know and I will come and visit you. Thank you.